Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here. This is, as I think you can all see, an extraordinary panel. I think we have roughly a third of the world's GDP. We have maybe a quarter of its population, though with Madame Lagarde here, we can perhaps claim we have 100%. I have searched in vain to find a panel that includes as many world leaders on one panel. Even if you look at it from an Asian perspective, it is very rare to find the leaders of such leaders from China, Japan, and Russia in one room. I think the coming together is a tribute to Mr. Putin's energy and powers of persuasion, but it may also just be a sign of Donald Trump's unique ability to bring people together. Without him, although he likes surprises and he often changes. The format is that each of the panelists will come up and deliver some brief opening remarks, and then we will have a discussion between all of us. The aim is for the first remarks to be relatively brief, so we can have a full and frank discussion afterwards. The first panelist to talk is our host, the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin.
Уважаемый господин Эммануэль Макрон, уважаемый господин Синдзо Абе, уважаемая госпожа Лагард, господин Ван Qishan, дамы и господа, дорогие друзья. Я очень рад приветствовать всех вас в России на 22-м Петербургском международном экономическом форуме. Встречи в Санкт-Петербурге стали хорошей традицией, и мы дорожим той атмосферой доверия и открытости, в которой проходит форум. Вот сейчас мы, что называется, в кулуарах обменивались
On the margins, we've been exchanging
впечатлениями о том, как идет работа, и госпожа Лагард мне только что сказала, что
how
приятно
the
удивлена
forum works,
вот
and
этой самой
Madame Lagarde
доброжелательной
just
атмосферой.
mentioned
Такая
how she was
дискуссия,
surprised by this
неформальный
positive
диалог
atmosphere.
особенно
And such a
важны
discussion, such an
сегодня,
informal
когда
conversation
система
is especially
международных
important today when the system
политических,
of international
экономических,
political,
торговых
economic and
отношений
trade
проходит
relations
серьезные испытания на
undergoes a serious
прочность,
stress test.
условия для ведения
And the
бизнеса,
conditions
для
for conducting business, for
инвестиций,
investments,
сама повседневная
the very
жизнь
day-to-day
динамично
life
меняются.
is changing dynamically.
Устойчивость,
The
характер и
quality,
скорость
the
роста
resilience,
мировой
the nature and the
экономики
speed of
всё
global
большей степени
economic
определяют
growth is
новые
defined
компетенции
to a
и
greater degree
знания
nowadays
людей,
by new
передовые
competencies and
технологии
skills,
и коммуникации,
the advanced
которые
technologies
еще
and
совсем недавно
communications,
просто
which
было
up until
невозможно себе
recently
представить.
it has been hard
Тот,
to
кто сможет
imagine.
эффективно использовать эти
Those who
факторы
can
роста,
efficiently
сумеет
use
обеспечить
these
рывок
growth
в
factors
экономике,
would
социальной
ensure
сфере, в
a leap,
науке и образовании,
economically,
существенно
socially,
повысить жизнь
scientific and
граждан.
educational leap, and will help to
Мы
boost the
обозначили
quality
эти
of
цели
life.
в приоритетах,
We have marked
как
these
национальный
goals
приоритет. В
as
ближайшее время
national priorities.
сформированное
And
правительство
very
России
soon, the
должно
newly formed
развернуть их в
government in
конкретные
Russia will
программы
transform
действий.
into specific programs of
Национальные
actions,
проекты и законодательные
national projects
инициативы
and
предусмотреть
legal
необходимые
incentives.
ресурсы
They
для
need to
выполнения
allocate
этих
the
задач.
required
В
resources
своем
as well.
развитии мы намерены
In our
опираться
development,
на
we will
наш
proceed
человеческий,
from our
творческий,
human,
кадровый потенциал,
creative and human
готовы
resources
учиться
capital.
и адаптировать
We are ready
лучшие мировые
to
практики.
learn and to adapt the best
Конечно, использовать
practices around the
собственный
globe,
успешный
and of
опыт
course use
решения
our own
сложнейших
successful
структурных
experience
задач.
of resolving the most
Мы будем
complex
действовать прежде всего
structural
исходя из
tasks.
своих национальных интересов.
We will
Это
proceed from our
естественно
national
для любого
interests.
суверенного
This is natural
государства.
for any
Но
sovereign
свои
state.
интересы
But
можно
our
продвигать
interests
по-разному.
can be advanced
Либо
differently as
игнорируя
they are
других,
around the globe.
либо
You can either
уважая
ignore others
позицию
or
партнеров.
respect the position of your
Понимая,
partners.
что современный мир взаимосвязан,
We understand
а
that
страны
the modern world is
взаимозависимы.
very much
И на
interconnected
каждом
and the
государстве,
countries are
особенно на
interdependent,
крупных
and
ведущих
each
экономиках мира,
state,
лежит колоссальная
including
ответственность
the world's
за
leading
общее
power,
будущее.
bear the brunt of
Россия
colossal
— это часть
responsibility
мировой
for our
экономики.
common
Мы
future, and
активно
Russia is
участвуем
part of the
в
global
интеграционных
economy. We
проектах,
actively take
оказываем
part in
серьезное влияние
integrational
на
projects.
энергетические,
We are also a major
продовольственные,
influence
другие рынки.
on energy,
Наша
food,
страна и
and other
компании
markets. Our
глубоко
country and
вовлечены
our
в
companies
международные
are very
торговые,
deeply involved
финансовые,
into
производственные
international
связи.
trade, finance, and
Поэтому мы
industrial
внимательно
ties.
изучаем, какие
That is why we are
стратегии
following
хозяйственного,
attentively
технологического,
what economic,
социального роста
technological, social
планируется
growth
реализовать в
strategies
других
are
странах.
to be implemented in other
И,
countries.
конечно,
And undoubtedly, we are not impartial as to what global trends will pan out in long term. Up until recently, the global development was based on two pillars. First, that's the freedom of entrepreneurship, trade and investment. It is enshrined in the rules adopted by the players on the international arena. And secondly, the resilience and predictability of these rules, which is supported by very clear legal mechanisms. Based on these values and principles, the global economy, despite the recognized problems, has managed to achieve impressive results, to put on the development track the overwhelming majority of the international players, the majority of countries. However, today, we do not see the erosion. Regrettably, we see the true demolition of those principles. The system of multilateral cooperation, built over decades instead of a natural, needed evolution, is now being broken, roughly broken. The new rule nowadays is to break the rules. Market openness and honest competitiveness is pushed out by withdrawals, restrictions, and sanctions. You can apply different terms, but the essence is the same. They are now an official tool of trade policy for many countries. And other states just have to adapt to that, to respond, to use mirror measures. I would like to draw your attention to one very poignant fact. Just recently, every meeting of the leaders of the G20 or other summits ended in a joint statement on the non-introduction of new protectionist barriers. Indeed, these statements did not have any legal force, but new barriers in trade are still being erected. Today, we cannot even decide on even such symbolic steps to be taken. Another example, the decrease in the speed of new agreements on free trade. This process started some 5 or 7 years ago. In 2010, the WTO notified more than 30 such agreements, and last year only 10. And I have a feeling that they are going to keep falling in numbers. And if previously the classical protectionism was rampant, such as additional import duties, technical requirements, or hidden subsidies, then today we are talking about a new edition of protectionism on the use of the evidently far-fetched excuses on references to the interests of national security, and all that for what? In order to crush competitors or to extort concessions. This sanction and restriction spiral is only worsening, and it hits more and more countries and more companies, including those who are sure that they would be immune to this regime of trade restrictions, that such problems would pass them by. However, the arbitrariness and connivance breed the desires to use restriction tools, time and time again, left and right, on any occasion. Despite the political loyalty, the talks of solidarity, the previous agreements, and the multi-year cooperation agreements. Here we have many representatives of business, and you're well aware that the withdrawal of one of the parties to the contract, the disruption of the agreement, translates into significant risks and expenses. This is the axiom of global business practice. And on the global scope, such behavior of states might lead to most negative and disruptive consequences. And even now, when the slide of the existing norms and the loss of mutual trust might be exacerbated by the unpredictability and turbulence of the colossal technological changes. Such a turn of events might lead to a systematic crisis, which the world has not yet seen. It is going to affect all of the players of the world economic arena. Global distrust puts into question the prospects of the global growth. The logic of the economic selfishness does not combine well with today's specialization of countries and companies with forging complex global industrial chains that might throw the global economy back into the far past, to the times when people lived off the land, when people had to produce everything themselves. And this undeniably leads to the fall in efficiency of global economy, to losses in labor productivity, to wasting the advances of science and technology, which could have changed the people's life for the better. Another worrying trend we are observing is that the stability of business ties is being undermined. The integrational processes are being strengthened. The multilateral cooperation is being depreciated, as well as the efficiency of international institutions and agreement. The international community cannot find the acceptable solutions within the framework of the World Trade Organization, which, despite all the difficulties and all the differences, is the key link in the global trade system. The most important universal platform for dispute resolution and forging dialogue on the issues which concern all of the economic players. That is true indeed, that the WTO is far from perfect, and yet there are no intractable problems within the WTO. To discard it and not create anything in return means to disrupt the balance. And then the trade disputes would not have any plaintiffs, not any defendants, only force will decide who is right. Naturally, we're not talking about freezing the existing order to make dogmatic something that is practically lifeless. The world is changing, and thus the institutions and rules should change as well. One thing is clear, these rules should be transparent and common for everyone. They should be observed by all the participants of international economic relationships. What is also important is that we need to develop and implement a legitimate change mechanism within the framework of which the international community will be able to discard the outdated and inefficient and archaic norms. At the same time, keeping the best instruments and creating new instruments which are on par with modern requirements. In this vein, for a global trade agenda, especially relevant are the areas where the multilateral rules of the game are only forming, that is, the development of new technological markets, for example, e-commerce, access to information and transparency as well, the protection of intellectual property and consumer rights, as well as new digital services. Negotiations on the majority of these topics have been launched. It is evident that it would take a while. We need to conduct thorough work, we need patience, and we need insistence. But I would reiterate, there is no alternative to joint drafting of rules in the global economy. It is simply non-existent. We do not need trade wars and not even temporary truces and trade wars. We need a full-time trade peace. The motto of this forum is building a trust economy. And I am convinced that the very life itself bespeaks of the need to make trust at the center for development. Just take a look at the high-tech companies, various startups, science, innovative areas which are far ahead of the traditional legal corporate regulations, and the work of partners, even though they might have difficult relationships in between themselves, are based on mutual trust. And I know that at the forum, this topic was raised many a time. We are not trying to idealize the situation. Rivalry, conflict of interest has always been present and will always be present. But we need to respect each other. Our ability to resolve our disputes in fair competition and not in limiting the competition defines further growth. This is the basis for firm and robust development of each and every country for the implementation of the colossal scientific and technological potential accumulated in the world. Russia supports free trade and economic integration. We support constructive partner dialogue. We urge our partners from Europe, the US, Asia, and other regions of the world to move together towards the implementation of the SDGs, to develop such a growth model which would be an adequate response to global challenges. I'm talking about overcoming the inequality of opportunities, of resolving demographic and environmental problems, of keeping national cultures and identities to boost the prosperity of our people, the broad use of the advantages of the new technological way. All countries in this or that combination face all of this problem. But we are unique in the fact that we face the whole gamut of those issues at once. And in order to be ourselves, we need to resolve those tasks simultaneously as well. For us, an undeniable value is to ensure state sovereignty and to keep national identity. At the same time, we need to make a major leap in development, to be among the world's leaders on life expectancy and quality of life. We need to be one of the global technical leaders. The vision for the development of our country is based on 4 key principles. First, we need to build our policy around human beings, on their prosperity, interests and demands. I am convinced only such a country can be strong and successful that helps its people to exalt and tap into their potential. We need to modernize the economy and create jobs. We need for the citizens' incomes to go up. We need to make the healthcare and education one of the best in the world. We will use the best practices in building cities and villages, in organizing comfortable spaces for life, for work, and for leisure. We need to boost the volume of construction and resolve the problem of accessibility. First of all, for middle-income families, for families with children. Another important area is to improve the environment. That would be the contribution made by Russia into the resolution of global environmental problems. Each person needs to have an opportunity to realize their potential in public life, in voluntary activities, in industry, in business. They need to have a good start in life. Social mobility, strengthening of the staff potential, the link between the generation can guarantee sustainable development. We have launched a whole series of projects on support and promotion of talented, ambitious young people, be it school children or students or recognized professionals. This program also seeks to provide guidance and counsel to them. We want to make this work systematic, and we have created the organization Russia, Country of Opportunities. The relevant decree, as many of you are aware, has been signed, and on par with other structures, we will coordinate this work between the 2 organizations. We will resolve the task that I just mentioned. And second, we will broaden freedom space. We talked about this often. This is not the first time when I or my colleagues mentioned that. However, this is highly important, so I would like to reiterate that. This is very important for the creation of a strong civil society, for the development of economy and social sphere, science and culture. Our strategy to lift barriers and to liberalize the law is in accordance with the interests and demands of our citizens. We will create such conditions for business who are working in Russia, which would be on par with the highest international standards. This is also true for the support of business initiatives. A year ago, here at the St. Petersburg Forum, I highlighted the need to actively make use of the instrument of project financing. And today, and this is a positive development, we have launched a new mechanism, a sort of a conveyor for project financing. Only within the framework of this forum, we will sign the agreements on financing of new investment projects for more than 700 billion rubles. And in the year terms, the volume will exceed 1 trillion rubles. This program was implemented by the Bank of Russia, the financial and economic bloc of the government, and the Foreign Economic Bank. We've managed to avoid some bottlenecks related to bank regulations and to guarantee the investors' interests. As a result, we have attracted major private investments with minimal budget expenses. And I would like to highlight, on the basis of a market, transparent mechanism of project selection. Many things when it comes to the implementation of plans and projects in economics and social infrastructure would depend on the regions, on their efforts and on their efficiency. I believe it is important to stick to the course to qualitatively update regional teams. It is on this level that we see the formation of a new governance culture, modern approaches to resolving economic and social tasks. Open interaction formats between the state and the public are now established. The participation of the citizens in resolving everyday tasks. And you know that a number of very successful governors are now part of the new government of the Russian Federation. Today, we see the rivalry on the rise for the business environment, for investors, for the best staff, and it means that we have managed a constant change mechanism. A major role in this has been played by the Russian Investment Climate Index. As per tradition, I would like to congratulate those on top of the list. This is the Qishan region, Moscow, the Republic of Tatarstan. The top 5 also includes the Tula region, and what I really appreciate, my native city of St. Petersburg. I would like to add that the positive dynamics have been observed in the far east of Russia regions, as well as Buryatia, Kaliningrad, Pskov, Novgorod, and Yaroslavsky regions. I believe that all of our region would continue to progressively implement these projects. And third, for a technological breakthrough to be competitive in a modern, dynamic world, we need to be susceptible to new ideas, for technologies which change the life of the people, which define our future. We have adopted a major comprehensive program of digital development. This is one of the priorities for us in the upcoming years. We are talking first and foremost on the development and broad use of cross-cutting digital solutions within the framework of governance in economy, social sphere, energy, industry, and transport. Here, we are ready to cooperate with all the interested parties. Together, we might make use of the advantages and respond to the risks of the digital era. By using this opportunity, I would like to invite you all to participate in the second Global Manufacturing and Industrial Summit. It is going to take place in Russia, in the Urals, in Ekaterinburg. The focus will be on the questions related to the use of the advanced promising technologies in economy, industry, and other areas. And the fourth principle for our development is the openness of our country, of our desire to be actively involved in global processes and integrational projects. For this, we need to implement major infrastructural projects. This is the most important component of our national agenda. By developing transport, energy, digital backbone of Russia, we will efficiently integrate it into the global infrastructure. And by doing this, we will open new opportunities for our citizens, for Russian and foreign business, to strengthen the role of Russia in global transport and ICT systems. Dear friends, dear colleagues, I've mentioned the interdependence of the modern world. And by working to resolve our task, by working to have a breakthrough in all areas, we will come up with technologies and solutions which will not only allow to boost the quality of life for the citizens of Russia, but would also be in high demand in other countries. They will have a positive effect on their development. And of course, moving forward towards our goals, we need to use and to share the best practices and achievements of other countries and other peoples, our partners. Our future cannot be forged alone. Undoubtedly, unlimited prospects are only opened through cooperation and joining of ranks. Russia is keen to have such cooperation, and I'm sure that together, by strengthening trust and the spirit of partnership, we will be successful. Thank you for your attention.
The next speaker is the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président de la Fédération.
Thank you, Mr. President of the Russian Federation, Prime Minister of Japan, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, Madam Director of the IMF, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, heads of companies, friends. Mr. President, I'd like to thank you for having us here in St. Petersburg, and such a wonderful city where we remember that loss of trust can result in terrible consequences. As this is an economic forum, we can only talk about economics, but you spoke about geopolitics, well, this morning. On the other hand, I personally visited Peskarovskaya Cemetery in order to pay tribute to those people who just several decades ago in this very city fought for their very survival against a terrible siege when hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, soldiers, civilians, adults, children. At the very beginning of the Second World War, hundreds of thousands of people perished. I know, Mr. President, that this page of history is of particular importance to you because you personally, your family, had your own losses. So I would like to pay tribute to all the people of St. Petersburg. I believe that the world of today is losing trust. We lose sight of that. When the first signs of this loss of trust are there, when we feel that we are moving towards something horrendous, we have to take responsibility. We have to remember the history, the past. Right now, this moment, give us a hint that trust at the international level is eroding due to a number of developments, geopolitical ones, military ones, sometimes economic phenomena that can have most detrimental consequences. So the theme of this forum, I believe, is very apt, is very well chosen. And trust can be different too. Trust as an ability to believe in oneself so well as to believe another. That is the capacity to build something in the long run. As you know, it's said in War and Peace by Tolstoy what happened between Pierre Bezukhov and Platon Karataev. The latter showed his optimism, his naivete, and at the same time belief in himself and the others. Bezukhov looked at Karataev, and he was incapable of believing in himself, and yet he was affected by this optimism of Platon Karataev. And as a result, he emerged stronger due to this contact with another person. That is what trust is about. For these ends, time is required. Respect for one another, dialectics with regard to yourself and to those around you. That is what we are to build on this day. I believe that our past, our history, have given us all the premises for building this trust. Let me get back to the notion of trust. Trust is a process which is built stage by stage, together. We were working in peaceful nuclear. We were building the infrastructure of Europe. We came into outer space together despite the difficult context, despite some sanctions. We persevered in developing our energy sectors. French enterprises remained in the Russian market during the most difficult times of history. They did not quit Russia. In other words, Russia is one of the first foreign employers for us. And we also employ 170,000 Russian citizens. And the EU is the first trade partner. It represents 47% of Russian imports, far ahead of China. And there are many other promising projects. Our companies have signed 50 agreements just as part of this visit today. Some of the partnership agreements were signed during the most difficult times of our history. We have to rely upon this creative force, because that is something we believe in. Both France believes in that, and France and Russia too. Our presence here, as well as the presence of Japan, are testimony to the mutual nature of these aspirations, and I would like us to continue to work in this direction. It was with great pleasure that I listened to the opening remarks of His Excellency President of Russia, dear Vladimir. I believe we indeed have to work together. We have to respect multilateral commitments undertaken as part of the WTO in terms of tariff and non-tariff barriers. We have to have numerous projects so that France could participate in diversifying Russia's economic growth in many domains, be that new vehicles, urban development, healthcare. We've got to work amid any conditions, and we've got to do everything in our power so as to overcome any difficulties that might arise. Russia has a destiny, a future of its own. It has its unique geography, and due to these factors, Russia is an inalienable part of Europe. And I believe we've got to maintain dialogue with everyone, with the Middle East, with Asia, but our roots are joint, are common. Yes, over the recent years, there's been a number of many misunderstandings and many errors made that very often lead to tensions. Over these 2.5 decades, we should have linked our fates together so as to create a new historical trend, because our identity, our common geography, all of that pushed us in that direction precisely. I would very much like us in the coming decade to be able to work hand in hand so as to rebuild the atmosphere of trust which we are in so desperate need of. And that means that we've got to have shared geostrategic goals. We've got to resolve the current crises and remove the divergences we have on many issues. That's something we talked about yesterday with President Putin. We know that there are formats for that, there are some frameworks for that, and we've got to work within those frameworks, and we also have to work on new projects. We need a new philosophy for Europe. I've just listened to the 4 priorities that you've set forth, Mr. President. First, to make a human being the centerpiece of new humanism, for humans to be able to fulfill, to express themselves in a society that is full of trust and confidence in itself. We've got to work on a new economic model, a new social model, and your society will be better in such a new model. And I'm confident that within a strong partnership with the European Union, you'll be able to achieve these goals. We've got to do everything we can so that this continent, where democracy, the progress of the middle class, market economy, you know, all these trends were born here in Europe. So despite all the tribulations, geopolitical trials, we've got to rebuild this model, a world at whose very center will be the life of human beings. That should be the underlying principle of our partnership, which I so desperately want, so that we could work on strengthening peace and security in our continent. This responsibility is conferred upon us. We've got to revisit our shared interests. So let us sit at the negotiating table and work together. I'm willing to do that. We have all the opportunities for that. We have a chance to advance in that regard. Should we miss this opportunity, maybe that'll be forever. I would very much like Russia to stay part of the Council of Europe. And on many issues in defense and social issues, I would like our strategic dialogue to gain or regain new dynamism. Now, as for trust, in the international arena, we can see that a new door is opening, a new era is opening up. Yes, we're concerned by many phenomena such as climate change, energy transformation, digital transformation. There are a host, multitude of new trends. There is the problem of economic crisis, which only increases the divide, the gap between the developed countries and countries that are less developed economically. For many years, we were going through the crisis of globalization that resulted in our nations coming to doubt their very future. So, over the recent years, we've seen new trends emerge, which we have never thought about in the past, such as Brexit as part of the European Union. But when I look at this crisis, I believe that the main reason maybe is the lack of efficiency in development. I believe we see new trends emerge. You've mentioned them already. The fragmentation of the world in particular, when trying to play around the fears of people, some forces trying to use these fears to their advantage in order to sow even more mistrust and suspicion, be that in economic growth, collective security, or cyberspace. Any fragmentation will serve as an instrument of sowing fear. Japan, Russia, France, just as China, as well as all of our foreign partners, have shared interests. Interests that consist in responding within this context by devising new methods and relying on some very basic concepts. And that is the third point I'd like to make, and then I'll conclude. In order to fight this suspicion and mistrust, we've got to devise a terminology, conditions of what I call a multilateral approach, which encompasses sovereignty as well as fully fledged integration. With regard to that multilateral approach that I'm always talking about, you cannot trust, as I mentioned when talking about also, you cannot trust others if you do not trust yourself, if you do not respect yourself. If you do not respect yourself, then no one will respect you. So in this field, I believe, we've got to fight for sovereignty and for its respect. I want us to respect one another. I want there to be no intervention, no interference in any form whatsoever. If we sign an agreement, then we've got to stick to that agreement. If that is the choice we have made, regardless of who withdraws from this treaty or stays within it, we've got to fight so that our sovereignty should stay an indivisible right of each and every country, despite negative conditions, because that is the cornerstone of stability for our business. Yes, sometimes we've got to introduce some limits, but what do our citizens want? They want the authorities to be accountable. Shouldn't it be the government that should be held accountable to its citizens? So, I advocate the sovereignty of my country, France, as well as the choice that we have made, such as signing the joint comprehensive deal on Iran. That was our choice yesterday. Mr. President, you didn't remind me that we talked about the Rome the Roman principle, pacta sunt servanda, what has been signed should stay forever. And here I'd like to lay the foundation for cyberspace, for information protection, as well as for sovereign discussions held at any level and in any format. I want all the new rules to be respected, and for that we need a strong sovereignty. And we did just that when we decided to revive the European defense project. This idea goes back to 1950s, but back then it was not accomplished. It didn't come to fruition, and we've got to pick it up and continue following up on it at the pan-European level. I believe in the European sovereignty, in particular in information space. Today, the European Union is introducing unprecedented legislation, which will govern all the European Union members. This is what lays the foundation, the groundwork that will help the citizens of our countries build trust in their government. It also helps us create better conditions for the development of our business, for the development of our financial and banking systems. We've got to advance further so as to protect our strategic interests, and this work has already started. We also have to have financial sovereignty for Europe to be able to make a choice of its own and then to stick to it. To that end, I believe the dialogue which we have right now with our partners is an irreplaceable link in this general chain. Another key word in the world today is cooperation, because trust is possible when there is dialogue, when there is an exchange, and cooperation if our partner tells us about their choice or pursues this choice, and there is trust. Yes, there are some differences, but those differences have to be visible and transparent, just as we have with Russia. Yes, we've got our differences, but we also have some common denominators. And as of now, we are working out a concrete roadmap which I'm confident will give us a chance to continue our joint work. It is precisely this cooperation that will also help us move forward with our other partners such as Japan, Russia. All of this will help us not just protect such decisions as the joint comprehensive deal on Iran, but also it will also help us in a mechanism that will bring stability, greater stability to the Middle East. Maybe together with Iran, it will help us address other issues such as the ballistic missile program of Iran, other regional matters. We'd like to work with our partners together, including with China, and such projects as the new Silk Road, which will allow us not just to outline a new multilateral approach. It will also help us secure sovereignty and stability of our partners. And precisely for this reason, with Japan, Australia, New Zealand and India, I wanted to have a new strategy in order to reinforce our sovereignty in this region, because I do believe in the spirit of cooperation. And precisely for this reason, France has chosen to work with all the countries in sub-Saharan Africa. We have also decided to devise a new policy aimed at peacekeeping and reinforcing stability in the African continent. And ultimately, once we have secured sovereignty and cooperation, we've got to rebuild the multilateral approach. Everything we've been talking about since this morning, the sovereignty which we'd like to protect,
qui nous permet d'obtenir des
all of
résultats.
this
Pour protéger nos classes moyennes
requires
contre les destructions d'emplois et l'augmentation des prix que provoquerait une guerre
legal
commerciale.
norms
Pour
so as to
apporter une
protect
véritable réponse
our
aux
nations
déséquilibres
against
mondiaux en renforçant
the
notre coordination
disappearance
au
of
G20
jobs
et à
and
l'OMC,
against the backdrop
pour
of
que
a
les
global
technologies, les
crisis,
financements,
so
les
as
compétences
to
soient
better
partout au
coordinate
rendez-vous
our
de
actions
l'économie
within
bas
such formats
carbone,
as the
pour enrayer
G20
la
and so on and
course
so forth,
vers le bas en matière fiscale comme en matière sociale, pour valoriser et
to
réguler
fight
la transformation
negative
technologique,
trends
pour construire
and
les instruments
the financial
du maintien de la paix.
sector and in the banking
de la
sector
baisse de
to
la
better work with
conflictualité.
new technologies
C'est ça l'objectif du
to
multilatéralisme.
create
Nous en
mechanisms
avons
of
les instruments.
peacekeeping. This is just
L'Organisation des Nations Unies,
a handful of
l'Organisation
goals
mondiale du
that
commerce,
a
le Fonds
multilateral
monétaire
approach
international.
pursues.
Nous avons des structures de
We've
concertation.
got good
Le
formats
G7,
like
le
the
G20.
IMF
Nous
the
devons
G20
œuvrer dans ces cadres.
or the G7.
Il se trouve que
All of these formats
la Russie
already
et la France
exist.
sont tous deux membres permanents du Conseil de sécurité.
And precisely upon
Allons
this
plus loin.
foundation we have to work.
Renforçons ce Conseil de
Russia
sécurité et les
and
Nations
France
Unies
are also
pour
permanent members of the
justement bâtir ensemble
UN
ce
Security
multilatéralisme
Council.
fort
Let us
qui
go
obtiendra
further.
des
Let us
résultats.
reinforce the
C'est
role
d'ailleurs
of
l'un
the
des
UN
seuls
Security
leviers.
Council so
Il
as
se trouve
to
que
better
la
create
Chine à nos
a
côtés
strong
a
multilateral
aussi cette
approach
volonté.
which will become a
croit
good
avec
lever
nos deux
in
partenaires,
building a better
anglais et
future.
américains, œuvrons
Incidentally,
en ce
China,
sens.
which is also a
Et
member
rendons
of
ces
the Security
Nations Unies
Council,
plus
is
fortes
willing to
encore.
work with
Ne
us.
les laissons
So
pas
let us do
être
everything
fragilisés.
we can
Nous
so
sommes
that both we
avec
and
le Premier
other
ministre Abe, nous
partners
serons
we
dans quelques
have
semaines au G7. Faisons du
could
G7 une instance
reinforce by
utile
joint efforts the
pour
role
la
of the
pacification
UN Security
commerciale,
Council.
le respect de nos règles
Let us
internationales
make our platforms
et justement de cette
useful
coopération indispensable. Et nous
and
serons
removing
ensemble au
trade
G20 dans
tensions
quelques mois.
and removing
cette enceinte
barriers.
également
And several
une
months
enceinte
we're
utile
going to meet
pour ce multilatéralisme
at
auquel
the
nous croyons.
G20 summit.
Et à ce titre,
So
le
let
Japon et la
us make
France auront l'année
this
prochaine
platform
une
useful
responsabilité
too
éminente
for
en
the sake of a
présidant
multilateral
le
approach.
G7 et le G20 la même année. C'est dans cet
We
esprit
will
que je veux
chair
que nous
the
avancions
G7
dans les
and
prochains
the
mois et les prochaines
G20
années pour essayer
the same
de
year,
rebâtir
and
cette
in
confiance
that vein,
indispensable
I'd like to
autour de
continue
ce
our work
triptyque
next
souveraineté,
year, the year after
coopération
that, in the
et
coming years,
multilatéralisme
so
fort.
as to
Et vous
strengthen
l'avez compris, la France et
sovereignty,
l'Union européenne,
cooperation,
ils sont
as well as
prêtes.
a strong
Elles ont cette
multilateral
volonté.
approach.
Nous
As you've
portons
understood,
avec
France
notre
and
partenaire
the
allemand,
European
avec
Union
qui sur
stand
ces
willing to
sujets,
do that.
nous
This is
œuvrons
what
main
we
dans la main,
aspire to,
à chaque instant.
together with our
Et avec
German
l'ensemble des pays européens,
counterparts,
cette ambition,
we'd like to
cet
move
agenda
precisely in that
fort
direction.
pour
All
l'Europe.
the EU
Mesdames et
members
messieurs,
want
je suis
this
lucide en
agenda
vous
to be
disant tout
implemented. Ladies and gentlemen,
La
I
tâche
have a
sera
very sober
difficile.
view of the situation.
et elle demandera en
Yes,
quelque
these
sorte
goals are far
d'en
from easy.
finir avec ce qu'Alexandre
What
Solzhenitsyn,
will
dont nous
require
fêtons le centenaire,
Is
appelait il y a 30 ans le
to put an
déclin
end
du courage.
to what 30 years ago
La période que nous
Solzhenitsyn
vivons
called
a besoin
the
de courage.
sunset of
Pas du
courage.
courage qui divise,
This
pas du
day, we need
courage
this courage, this
bravache qui consiste à
bravery. I'm
définir
not talking about
des formes de
foolhardiness
souveraineté qui serait un souverainisme de repli,
or reckless courage
une non-coopération, une fragmentation, non. D'un
that would
courage
make
porté par la
sovereignty
confiance en
an
soi.
autarchy, closing in
L'ambition, chacun où
and
nous sommes pour notre
self-isolation.
pays,
I'm
nos
talking about a
entreprises,
courage that
les
strengthen our
organisations que nous
confidence
dirigeons.
in ourselves. I'm talking
Et
about
nous avons beaucoup de
a
travail.
sentiment
Et croyez
that
bien que
will
la France
help
est
us
en train de le
improve the
faire
lives of our
pour avoir
nations.
cette pleine
And we've
confiance
got
et
a
ce plein
lot
optimisme.
of work
Mais
cut
le
out for
courage
us.
aussi de faire ensemble,
France is
d'œuvrer
actively working in this direction,
d'agir ensemble.
and let us be full of valor
Le
and
courage est de
courage to be
retour
working
en France.
together,
Il est de retour en
cooperating
Europe.
together.
Il est de retour
France
dans
has
l'ensemble des
seen
pays ici présents
the courage
et nous en avons
get back to
besoin.
our hearts and our
Alors
spirits,
que la Russie
and I can
s'apprête
see
à
this
accueillir une grande compétition
trend
sportive, je veux
exactly
conclure
in other
sur le
countries
sport
that are
pour former un
represented
vœu.
here. Russia
Nous connaissons tous
is now preparing
votre
for
goût,
the
Monsieur le
World
Président,
Cup
cher
that is going to
Vladimir,
be held in some weeks.
pour le judo.
Mr. President, dear Vladimir,
Et je sais que vous
we
appréciez
know
les
that you
valeurs
adore
de la voix,
judo,
de la souplesse.
We
Comme on
also
dit dans ce
know
sport qui est aussi un art.
that you
Elle repose
highly
sur la maîtrise de ses
appreciate
propres forces, la tactique plutôt que la
the
force brute,
flexibility that is
les
based
qualités
on
de la
self-control,
volonté et le respect de l'adversaire.
self-restraint,
Il y a beaucoup de sources d'inspiration pour les liens entre les peuples et entre les nations dans ces
feelings as willpower and respect for your adversary.
C'est un sport collectif.
Let us emulate these principles in the international arena. I love sport, I love
Alors,
football.
Je souhaite que nous trouvions en nous la
And in
force de nous
football, I
engager
think
ensemble
these
dans un
qualities
jeu
also
collectif,
apply.
coopératif,
So let us
fondé sur ces valeurs
play
de respect
a
et de
cooperative
confiance
game, a collective
que nous
game,
devons mieux
a
protéger.
joint game
Voilà,
that is
mesdames
going to
et
be
messieurs, chers
based
amis,
upon the very
le
same
message que je
principles
voulais
of
avec
trust
vous
we are to
aujourd'hui
cherish.
Je vous remercie.
And that is all, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I wanted to tell you about my values. Thank you.
The next speaker is Prime Minister. Next speaker is Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan.
John Micklethwait-san.
Thank you very much, Mr. Micklethwait. President Macron, Vice President Wang, and Managing Director Lagarde, it is my pleasure to join you all for the session. President Putin, thank you very much for having me here today. Especially in this beautiful St. Petersburg, I'm very much grateful for you to have invited me. I have longed to go to the Hermitage Museum. That was my first time. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, this year the Japan national soccer team, Samurai Blue, will come to Russia. Their eyes set on winning the FIFA World Cup. The Samurai Blue will fight their way through to the finals to find themselves head-to-head against Russia in the final match. Well, it may have been spiked by a severe case of jet lag. That is my dream, peculiarly optimistic, I admit. Here in front of Emmanuel and Christine, I dare say, this dream of mine means that France's Le Bleu is defeated tragically in the semifinals, falling to none other than the Samurai Blue. Emmanuel, you must surely have been thinking in such a match the French team would certainly trounce Japan. But you know how the old saying goes, if you're going to dream, you'd better dream big. Let us just imagine. Let us just imagine how will the world look when a lasting stability comes to take hold between Japan and Russia. We will have established a pillar of peace in a major corner of the northern and eastern hemispheres. That will be a substantial pillar that underpins the region and indeed the world. At that time, the Arctic Ocean to the Bering Sea, the North Pacific, and the Sea of Japan will together form a major arterial sea road of peace and prosperity. The islands that used to be a source of conflict will have found new potential as a logistics hub, transforming into a symbol of Japan-Russia cooperation. The Sea of Japan will also most likely change dramatically as a highway sending goods back and forth. Vladivostok, work to improve its beautiful port and make it a gateway to the ocean is already making headway, thanks to efforts on both the Japanese and Russian sides. Just imagine what would come and go from the Arctic Ocean to the Sea of Japan. There can be no doubt that liquefied natural gas, or LNG, brought up from the Arctic Ocean gas fields, including notably Yamal LNG, will be found among that cargo. The LNG that arrives via heavy icebreakers can be loaded over into regular tankers somewhere north of Japan. After that, it would head off to users in China or in Asia, far away in India, thanks to handling by Japan's highly experienced corporations. Japan is the world's largest importer of LNG.
The corporation that is the world's largest buyer of LNG is also found in Japan. Because Japan furnishes a wealth of experience in market making and in developing price mechanisms, we can be certain that a win-win situation will form here for Japan and Russia. Russia's Arctic Ocean LNG will enable it to become a great swing producer, impacting world markets by partnering with Japan. From the Arctic Ocean to the Bering Sea and the North Pacific Ocean, and from the Sea of Japan to the Indo-Pacific Ocean. The axis of strategic antagonism that existed during the Cold War will undergo a dramatic transformation, becoming seascapes of peace and prosperity. Of course, these changes will also make it a space thoroughly permeated by the rule of law. Only then will the potential held by Northern and Far East Russia be released in earnest, and the Russian economy will grow as if it had just been turbocharged. That will be in the interests of all of Russia's neighbors, including Japan, and will constitute an important contribution to the global economy. Is all this simply building castles in the air? A fanciful daydream, nothing more? I think not. It is an objective we are most certainly able to reach if only we continue to take one step forward and then another. And ladies and gentlemen, a Japan-Russia peace treaty is a necessity in particular to make that grand vision a reality. At least, every time President Putin and I meet, we reconfirm that with each other, and it is something we have done right up to the present day. Ladies and gentlemen, a century since the revolution, 70 years since the end of the Second World War, and a quarter century since a newborn Russia joined the world, having come through a highly eventful history full of difficult times, young people in Russia now, at long last, seem to have begun to live their lives moving forward with their eyes firmly fixed on the future, thinking about the long term. I will say this to you forcefully and unmistakably. It will be by taking Japan as a partner that you will gain tremendous momentum as you move forward. But words alone can't convey that sense to you adequately. It will be necessary to put forth tangible results so that the average Russian can understand what kinds of good things will result from Japan and Russia joining hands. With that in mind, we laid out 8 fields for cooperation that we proposed to Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, in my cabinet, there is a minister responsible for a post that I established especially for that very purpose. Minister Seko, may I ask you to stand for a moment? Thank you very much. Minister Hiroshige Seko has made visits to places all around Russia ever since he assumed the post of Minister for Economic Cooperation with Russia, including not only Moscow and St. Petersburg, but also Vladivostok, Voronezh, and Ekaterinburg. At the end of April, in order to visit Yamal LNG, he also went to Sabeta, where it was still very cold. This summer, he also has plans to visit the Sakha Republic. All this makes him the very first Japanese minister in the history of our bilateral relations to visit so many places in Russia. Thanks in part to the efforts he has made, the number of Japanese-Russian economic cooperation projects continues to rise everywhere from Khabarovsk to Moscow and have already surpassed 130. There is innovation in agriculture for growing vegetables that are fresh and lush. There is a project for renovating the urban infrastructure and for reducing automobile traffic jams by 30%. That is a project in Voronezh. Just recently, on May 7th, President Putin announced the national goals and strategic objectives through to 2024, setting forth key policies for improving Russians' quality of life and pressing forward with reforms to the socio-economic infrastructure. The 8-point cooperation plan that Japan proposed is in complete alignment with those key policy areas. Moreover, Japan has been making contributions through concrete projects. Japan hopes to become an accelerant or a catalyst for socio-economic reforms in Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, the first role that Japan will shoulder is promoting Russia's health. This means saving the lives of babies and small children and making it possible for elderly people to live long and healthy lives. A rehabilitation center was completed in Vladivostok this May through Japan-Russia cooperation. Even when one suffers a stroke and becomes unable to move freely, there is no need to throw in the towel on one's life. Japanese medical technology will brighten the lives of people who might have until now sunk down into the depths of despair. It will enable people to move. For diagnosis and treatment performed with an endoscope, Japan's technology is first-rate even at the global level. This is also an area in which we've been engaged in cooperation with Russia for quite some time. Getting an early look by using an endoscope makes it possible to remove tumors that have begun to reveal themselves deep in the internal organs. Finding issues early brings down the costs of medical treatment and extends people's long and healthy lifespans. That is help for Russians in changing their lifestyle. Japan, which hopes to engage in that kind of cooperation, is for the Russian people a partner that extends their lives and fosters hope. President Putin has said he will raise the average Russian life expectancy to 80 by 2030. To achieve that, allowing Japan to work its magic will surely be in the cards. The second role that Japan will shoulder is assisting in boosting productivity. What tactics and stratagems are needed to increase, by even a single item, the output coming off of a production line per unit of time? How should the equipment best be laid out, and where should tools and jigs best be set? People coming from Russia are now visiting various kinds of Japanese companies to acquire that kind of wisdom by seeing workplaces with their own eyes and physically engaging with things with their own hands. In fiscal 2017, 144 Russian business persons visited Japan to observe well-known Japanese companies, spending a total of 115 days there on site. One outcome has been a factory manufacturing car parts in Ulyanovsk Oblast, slashing the manufacturing time for its components from 90 minutes to 30. I've heard that there are even examples of the incidence of defective products improving dramatically from 22% down to effectively zero at a different auto parts factory in the same oblast. Those kinds of efforts are called Kaizen in Japanese. As you know, the word is becoming increasingly well-established in Russia as well. Workers manning the production lines lift their gaze to about the height of the factory ceiling and take in a panoramic view of the entire manufacturing process. The innovations and wisdom of coming up with ideas for improvements through that approach have enhanced productivity at Japan's factories. At these times, workers shift away from being only on the side, receiving orders and instructions. They become virtually like designers, seeing the entire production line three-dimensionally. It is there, changing the workers in that way, where Japan's secrets of increasing productivity lie. When you have more workers brimming with confidence and a sense of duty, who also feel the value in working, productivity increases. What Japan can provide is a labor culture that relies on workers individually. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin and I have made it a habit to meet as frequently as we can. Tomorrow, we will move our venue to Moscow and again engage in thoroughgoing talks. It will be our 21st summit meeting. The reason that Japan-Russia relations have now begun
Over the last 20 times, we have met and we have built trust. The reason that Japan-Russia relations have now begun to move in a big way is that President Putin and I are absolutely determined that we will get our bilateral relations in motion and have both done our very utmost towards this end. If we do not change things now, then when will we change them? If the two of us do not get our bilateral relations moving, then who else will get them moving? We both have this firmly engraved in our minds every time we meet. That is the relationship President Putin and I share. The result has already been a rapid change away from thinking that was limited to I can do X and Y, but no more, to a broader way of thinking. Our approach is now, well, if I can do X and Y, then surely I can do A, B, or C as well. A company supplying hot springs resorts came from Hokkaido to Yuzhno-Sahalinsk to spread among the local people the joys of relaxing in a steaming bath. This all started with a breezy idea of, all right, let's just give it a try. I imagine that this business would not have come all the way from Japan had it not had the confidence that it could achieve anything it put its mind to. The practice of Japan and Russia joining hands in this way is just beginning to grow. This is exactly what President Putin and I have kept hoping for. The slogan of this year's forum is building a trust economy. I would like you all to recognize that Japan and Russia are most certainly together engaged in the practice of building a trust economy. Ladies and gentlemen, we wish for Northeast Asia to become a place of peace and prosperity that is truly stable. This time, the U.S.-North Korea summit meeting will not take place. What is important, though, is that whether or not North Korea will comply with relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions and carry out denuclearization in a complete, verifiable, and irreversible manner, and then the abduction issue. Will it return all the people it lawlessly stole away from Japan? When we make sure with our own eyes several significant ifs and are able to be satisfied, then at long last Japan will be able to conceive of cooperative relations with North Korea viewed over the long term. In order to accelerate this process, and North Korea has diligent people and abundant resources. If North Korea chooses to go to the right direction, and then North Korea can enrich people, can enrich the nation, I am sure that is the reason why, in order to accelerate this process and move it in a favorable direction, what will become even more critical than ever is cooperation between Russia and Japan. And then France, China, and of course the United States are okay. People across the world. And we would like them to work together to push North Korea to the right direction. In order for us to do that, we must work in unity and tackle this problem North Korea poses. Vladimir, the two of us have held talks time and time again, shouldering our respective viewpoints on history, as well as our own particular public opinion and patriotic spirit, and we will continue to hold talks into the future. We now stand at a historical turning point. The path we should take and the efforts we should make are all entirely clear. It is working for future generations in Japan and Russia. It is Japan and Russia becoming a major force for safeguarding and fostering regional and global prosperity through the Japanese and Russian peoples, further deepening their relationship of mutual trust, concluding a peace treaty, and building up lasting peace and stability between our two nations. And it is overcoming all possible difficulties, with each of us demonstrating the utmost courage in order to make that a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. Spasiba.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Wang Qishan, the Vice President of the People's Republic of China.
I'm taking a look at my watch here. Dear President Putin, dear President Macron, dear Prime Minister Shinzo, dear Madam Executive Manager of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, I'm very happy to attend the 22nd Petersburg International Economic Forum, and I am sure that our joint discussion, building the economy of trust, will give us a lot of good and useful thought over the current reality and the future of the world. The development trends in the world are demonstrating a very fast pace towards the reform and innovations which are accompanied by challenges, which Chairman Xi Jinping described as the unprecedented one over the last 100 years. Not a single country by itself can cope with existing challenges, and to just take care of oneself and nobody else will be a failure. The global economy, although currently going through the recovery, but the extent to which it's going to be sustainable currently is difficult to see. And so under such circumstances, one of the most effective circumstances within which global potential can be utilized will be a cooperation between the businesses and the government into the economy of trust on the basis of mutual interest, benefit, tolerance, and goodwill. According to the theory of transactions, people cooperate, trade, and maintain tensions in order to enjoy an equitable profit. And so the trend towards improving this would be impossible without mutual trust. The norms of the international relations point to the countries enjoying a peaceful life when together they can overcome temporary difficulties on the basis of cooperation, where the founding part of it is trust. In order to be able to achieve trust, one should know and understand each other. Every country has their own realities, unique history and culture. Trust to each other may ensue only when you understand not only oneself, but also the other person. When you understand not only the modern dimension, but as well as an historic dimension, which is extremely important to be able to see the future. In order to create trust, one should respect each other, because only equitable consultations and mutual benefit bring prosperity and stability to each other's economy. But chasing only one's own national interests brings about a contrary kind of results, because politically and wielding sanctional club will definitely add to the unpredictability of the market. In order to create trust, one should understand and be able to resolve your problems, because trust and respect goes always to those who are able to achieve the said targets. Everybody has one's own problems, and the approach to them has to be realistic and definitely try and find out what are the true causes behind them, so as to arrive at a proper resolution. By no way one should allow the responsibility to be placed upon other people's shoulders. In order to create trust, you must have self-confidence. The capacity to grow in your self-awareness comes from self-trust and confidence, which means to entrust yourself to others and win other people's trust. So self-confidence is based upon self-awareness, which leads to an awareness of your own true path in life. Self-confidence leads to your outlook becoming broader and an ability to accurately assess the problems of time, overcome this self-confidence, stimulating open cooperation for the sake of common development. By building economy of trust, governments of different countries must strengthen mutual trust and become more active in their cooperation in the interests of resolving vital problems that the global community is facing, providing to the business, to the community and the people very specific political and institutional rules to create a very firm basis for the sustainable development for the global economy. One should definitely close cooperate with each other and look for the path towards the new reforms of the economic structure and innovative development. And in doing so, one should not pass up the opportunities of the forthcoming industrial revolution, enhance the new drivers behind the new economic growth. One should keep abreast with the economic globalization and try and share both the opportunities and benefits as much as possible with each other, take into account each other's interest, resolve trading disputes by way of consultations, and commonly fight against protectionism. We also need to uphold the multilateral approach, and first and foremost, the trust towards the multilateral trading, and by common efforts to further improve the system of global economic governance within the context of a new architecture of the global economy. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, after the 18th Congress of the Communist Party of China, the reputation and trust towards the Central Party Committee has grown, with the core being represented by Mr. Xi Jinping, which serves as a reliable political guarantee to implement strategic objectives with the coming of the new era of socialism with the Chinese peculiarity in it. We are going to be guided by the concept of the development aimed at a human being by everything we can do to promote comprehensive construction in the economy, politics, culture and environment. By deepening the reforms and further transparency, we would eliminate disbalances and the lack of full development, fight for the implementation of the Chinese dream of the great revival of the Chinese nation. China will invariably be implementing the strategy of openness on the basis of mutual benefit. Recently, Chairman Xi Jinping stated a whole number of new serious steps to expand the openness of China. I shall propose to all the nations to participate in the development of the Chinese economy so as to share whatever they can offer in the Chinese market. One voice, one path is the new platform for international cooperation initiated by China. We are ready to discuss with everybody what the future developments could be so as to create new impetus to the planetary development for the future. Dear ladies and gentlemen, being one of the participants of the global governance development, Russia has a very weighted place in the global economy. China highly appreciates the impressive results of the social and economic development which have been achieved under the guidance of President Putin, without any doubt. That is the kind of success that Russia will achieve its next 6-year period development targets as well. Throughout this year, more active is the trade and economic cooperation between China and Russia. The trade turnover reaches now $100 billion. The value of the 73 major cooperation project exceeds $100 billion. We are keen to further deepen this multilateral cooperation with the Russian partners so as to develop the relations based upon multilateral strategic cooperation in the spirit of equitable partnership, as well as the heritage of the century-old friendship, to make a new contribution into the development of the society, which will be inclusive to all. This year, we are celebrating the 350th anniversary of the foundation of St. Petersburg, and I would like to warm-heartedly congratulate the people of St. Petersburg and wish to them greater successes, as well as success to the participants of this forum. Thank you very much for listening. I have completed my presentation in just a few minutes, and that was my promise to President Putin, which I gave him yesterday. And so, because his trust to me is what I value very highly, and so I was able to stand true and stick myself to 7 minutes.
Thank you, Vice Premier, especially for your brevity. Now it is Christine Lagarde of the IMF.
You know, at this point in time, in this wonderful moment, I'm the fifth, and incidentally the only woman. So I will allow myself, given the number of men in the room, to tell you a little bit how I feel. You might feel frustrated because you've waited, but I feel like was supposed to have felt, so the story says, the fifth husband of Liz Taylor. He knew what was expected, but he wasn't sure how to be original. So, President, Vice President, Prime Minister, President Putin, thank you so much for having us in beautiful St. Petersburg, your hometown. And thank you very much for having asked me to also be brief, which I will endeavor. Nobody has yet mentioned Peter the Great, and I would like to remind all of us that the city where we are, where President Macron rightly reminded us of the tragedy that men can inflict upon themselves, men can also decide to take their compatriots' destiny into their hands and carry it further and create their vision with their support and their confidence. And that vision was certainly one of a city that was open to the world and that was going to bring all the talents and all the modernity that he could bring to bear in order to transform his country. What President Putin has asked me to do today is to say a few words about the global economy, a few words about the Russian economy, which is where we stand, to identify a couple of challenges as I see them from my vantage point, and to see how they could be addressed. The global economy, you know about it. Most of you actually transact, deal, build your supply chain in that global economy. And the good news today is that the sun is shining on the global economy. We went through a decade of difficult time, and now we have an economy that is doing well. 3.8% last year, probably 3.9% this year, and 3.9% next year. It is pretty good, given that it is also generated by about 120 countries, which represent 3/4 of world GDP. And that is beneficial to your businesses. That's the good news. The not so good news is that we are seeing storms in the forecast. And that storms as essentially three major clouds that I would identify for you. You can list many others, but the short-term clouds that we see are, number one, the level and the burden of debt that weighs on the shoulders of sovereigns and on the shoulders of corporates. Today we have about 164 trillions of debt, which represents roughly 225% of global GDP. That is way more than whatever the world has had, including after the Second World War. That's number one. Number two, I would mention financial fragility, which will probably result in significant capital outflows from emerging and low-income countries, which will find their way into more prosperous, remunerative, and better yield shores, including as a result of monetary tightening, as we will probably see it in the United States as a result of the stimulus-engineered growth that we are seeing on an economy that is already at full potential. The third cloud, that is probably the darkest one, is the determination of some to actually rock the system that has actually presided over the trade relationships that we have all undertaken and enjoyed to some extent over the last many decades. And that cloud, which would actually try to put a brake on the terms, the rules, and the movement of goods and services around the world, is clearly one that we should be watching, and one that is, as the presidents before me have indicated, largely based on the confidence. Now, a few words about Russia, as I promised President Putin. Russia has actually, and I can talk about it because we just completed the review of the Russian economy, Russia has put in place one of the most admirable macroeconomic framework that you can think of. A rainy day saving fund, letting its exchange rate float, introducing inflation targeting with success, and shoring up the banking system. And that has helped Russia weather very difficult circumstances in the last 3 years, Mr. President. It has also generated for Russia a very low debt, a very, if not non-existent, fiscal deficit, and very low unemployment. Now, is this entirely satisfactory for President Putin and his ministers, including his new vice premier in charge of economy, finance, and everything else? No, because clearly there has to be an improvement in productivity, there has to be diversification out of the oil and gas economy, there has to be boosting investment in health and education, reducing market concentration, and integrating more in the global economy. So I've done my duty talking about the global economy and Russia. I just want to now identify 4 quick challenges, or rather one single challenges, which can be attributed partly to 4 what I would call fault lines. And that challenge is the one that President Putin has identified for this forum, which is this issue of eroded confidence as we see it. I remember Mr. Van Rompuy, former president of the European Commission, saying, a Belgian proverb, la confiance arrive à cheval et repart à pied. Or is it the other way around? Confidence arrives on foot and goes on back horse. You build it over time, you lose it in next to no time. So let me mention 4 fault lines that we identify from an economic point of view as having contributed to this eroded confidence. The first one that we tend to forget is the depth and the wounds inflicted by the financial crisis. We tend to forget that many of our young people who arrive on the markets have actually been marked by this financial crisis that has destroyed so much in so many countries. The second fault line that I would mention is not only the perception, but the reality that the rewards of globalization have not been shared fairly. And yes, globalization, you will hear that many times over, has allowed many people to be lifted out of poverty. Yes, it has reduced the cost of living for many. Yes, it has improved productivity over the course of time. But it has made a few privileged, very wealthy, and has left to the side of the road quite a few, as well as having destroyed many sectors of activities in many specific regions. The third fault line that I would mention as well is technology. Many of you are concerned about it. Many of you are investing in machine learning, in artificial intelligence, in robotization. But many of those who work for you actually wonder whether the factory of tomorrow will be that described by some as a factory with two beings, a man and a dog. The man is feeding the dog and the dog is watching the man. I think that's probably an illusion, but that's how many people perceive the situation, where they will be displaced, where their job will be affected, and where as a result, they will be left out. One of the research that we have just completed actually indicates that while automation will boost productivity, it will also come at a much higher cost of inequality and will produce a lower labor share of income. All this seriously will contribute to undermining the pact of confidence that was built over time. Now, if you add to that a point that President Macron actually identified very well, is that the digital economy is leading to a surge of market power, of concentration of actors, where a few large tech companies actually have full control of the global movement of data and information. And this could add to fueling the disaffection that many people have, no matter how much they like their cell phone, watching their mail as the speakers speak, and playing games when they're a little bit bored. The final fault line that is also eroding the confidence, which is projecting yourself into the future and doing it together with others, is clearly climate change, which has major economic consequences, and where despite the extraordinary Paris Agreement, which calls on countries to reach zero greenhouse gas emissions, is not followed by actual action rather than simple commitment. So all that calls, in our view, for a renewed multilateralism. I'm not going to go into the details of what it would be like, but we have been there in the past. And the first part of the 20th century, which has left the scars that it has left in what was then Leningrad, which led to virtual cannibalism at the time, that first half of the 20th century has created the conditions under which multilateralism and the ethos of operating together was actually invented. And it is also as a result of that that the second half of the 20th century was a lot better than the first. It is that very ethos of multilateralism that is also being eroded at the moment. Now, of course, we need to grapple differently with these different challenges that I have mentioned. But think about the regulatory framework that is needed to manage the digital economy and the financial stability of an era where fintech are actually distorting conditions of the market, are displacing some of you, are disrupting the way in which money is moved around. Think about the policy responses to the future of work and how those fearing displacement will be given a chance. Think about how to make globalization work for more people, including by transforming and reinventing international taxation rules. And think about the efforts needed to fight climate change. Now, I'm not going to preach for my IMF. And as President Macron has indicated, we have institutions that have sustained the passing of time, that have produced efficiency, and that, yes, of course, need to be improved, need to see their mandate re-examined, need to see their tools probably changed. But it is through those institutions and through no other means, particularly unilateral ones, that things will actually improve. It would be a grave mistake to resort to protectionism and to unilateralism. This would be a self-inflicted wound. And let us not forget that trade leads to higher productivity, lower prices, and improved living standards, and that nobody wins a trade war. And that protectionism, at the end of the day, hurts the most underprivileged and the poorest in our societies. I said I would be short, and I would just want to conclude. To conclude, probably calling to the rescue Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a contemporary of Catherine the Great, who said, "J'arrive trop tard dans un monde où tout est déjà dit. I arrive too late in a world where everything has been said." No, not everything has been said, but lots of things have been said, and it is really upon the leaders of this world, many of whom present today, together with whatever support they need from international institutions, to actually not only talk, but walk the talk, as we should all do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had 5 very eloquent speeches, and now is the time for questions and I hope direct answers. The conversation has gone all the way from football to endoscopy and climate change, but now I wanted to center on that idea of trust and especially look at 3 areas where this is an issue. We have the Iranian nuclear accord, which you broke up. We have North Korea, where there seems to be news about Donald Trump. And we have the US-China trade war. And then we'll go and look at Russia's relationship with the rest of the world. Mr. Putin, as the host, will you take the first question? And I hope you will set the fashion for making a direct answer. There was a nuclear deal signed with Iran in 2015. Donald Trump, as we all know, has unilaterally withdrawn from it. You have condemned this. Mr. Macron has condemned this. We all know you want to keep the deal. You say you're a man of action. What actions will you take to keep the Iranian neutral deal, the Iranian nuclear deal alive now?
The so-called Iranian nuclear deal has been established by a respective UN Security Council. And that is a multilateral international legal document. If we want our actions to be predictable, we need to adhere to the common rules. Any unilateral action leads into a dead end and is always counterproductive. That is why all of us together, all of the participants in this process, should speak to each other sincerely and look for a resolution. So yesterday, we discussed this issue with President Macron, and an idea came to our mind. Every 4 years, presidential elections take place in the United States. So, if international legal treaties and documents are being signed, and every 3 or 4, maximum 4 years, they're going to be rethought. So what will be the time frame for planning if one follows this particular regime? It's going to be 0, which will lead to an environment wrought with mistrust and nervousness. And so if we treat what we agree upon with true sincerity, that would lead to reliability and predictability.
If during the previous sanctions regimes, Russia supported the sanctions against Iran and you followed the rules, this time you disagree with what has happened. If the Americans impose sanctions on Iran selling oil, will you buy the oil, perhaps in exchange for wheat or something like that, and allow Iran to get round the deal?
It's a very simple question to me, because we don't buy oil at all. We produce and sell it ourselves. We are the biggest supplier of oil to the global market. But in as far as sanctions are concerned, Russia supported sanctions on Iran the sanctions which were adopted by the Security Council of the United Nations and never supported anything that has been forced by anybody unilaterally. And this is something that I have always been talking about. I believe it to be counterproductive and damaging and detrimental, and experts here as well as in the West may recall my speech in 2005 in Munich when I was speaking about impermissibility to attribute extraterritorial nature to the legal names forced by a single state, in that particular case the United States. And many took offense with me in the United States, in Europe, but that is exactly something that I was warning people about. And so now it is flourishing. Look at it. So here you are. The food is served. So if we are attentive in our analysis of what is taking place, and if we respond on a timely basis, there would be fewer problems like that. So we have been supporting, everything that has been produced by the global community in order to convince the Iranian counterparts to reach the well-known terms and agreements. And you should really commend them that they went to a lot of compromises, and they are very true to all of their commitments. Very recently, I met with the head of the International Atomic Agency, a very reputable organization and very respectful person who we all trust. And yet again, he told me that based on the data that they have, Iran completely stands up to all of the commitments that they took. So what is it we should punish them for? I don't understand it. So this is the first part. Now, the second thing is what may happen if this whole deal is devastated. Will it be beneficial to anyone? Will it be good for the global community, for the future of the regions? Will the regional countries, including Israel, feel safe? The country that we have very good relations with, and very recently Prime Minister Netanyahu came to Moscow, and moreover he participated in the Victory Day events, and he held in his hand the photograph of one of the Second World War veterans and heroes when passing through the Red Square with us. That was a unique gesture demonstrating very credible, trustworthy relations between us. Is it going to be good for this country if Iran is pushed out of this treaty because the nuclear activities by Iran would be something that nobody would be able to understand? What kind of risks shall ensue from the... Look, we're not able to sort things out within Northern Korea because there's a problem upon a problem upon a problem. Nothing has been regulated. So do we want to now produce the second problem of the same nature? I mean, the hotspot of the kind of region that we remember it could be. So we should very calmly, in a very good-natured, professional way, maintain this dialogue and find a resolution. But then as far as sanctions are concerned, I already mentioned it, they have always been supportive of the legitimate activities at the level of the UN Security Councils and never supported anything that is being unilaterally forced upon everybody else.
President Macron, can I ask you, Total, Airbus, Renault, all these French companies have deals with Iran. How can you protect them? Can you offer them financial guarantees because they may not be able to trade with America?
Le cadre est clair. D'abord, je souhaite y revenir. La France a négocié, préparé, signé l'accord nucléaire de 2015.
Well, in France, we are also participated in preparing and signing this treaty of 2015, and we remain within it. And second point, France beginning from September 2017, in order to maintain the interests of all of the stakeholders, proposes to broaden this particular topic and include other items, nuclear area post-2020, and the regional technologies and ballistic technologies. This is the framework that we work within. And so within this context, the United States, in a unilateral manner, made a decision to withdraw from the treaty. I believe this is wrong, and I would like, for the next month, in a short-term perspective, we could make sure that the 2015 treaty shall prevail despite this unilateral withdrawal, and that the Iranians are going to uphold it. And so within this context, we may be well satisfied. by the kind of choice that Tehran has been demonstrating so far. And so we basically expressed specific concerns of the French Republic. This is my responsibility. We also gave a reply to our companies, and we undertook certain commercial protection measures. And I am supporting the measures undertaken by the European Commission, which is providing for respective reimbursement to companies, as well as working together with the European Investment Bank and compensation. And we do express our condolences to the companies which are suffering, because that would create a very firm commercial sovereignty. There are much bigger companies that you quoted as an example. They are present here. And this is not only the problem of the sanctions that they may fall under because they work in Iran or in Iran, but the problem of their own presence in the American market. And so I will definitely tell you quite clearly, I believe that France and Europe are against this extraterritoriality, because in the recent years we already suffered because of what happened in the past. And Mr. Putin is very much right, because it is impossible to have any cooperation if there is no mutual trust. And so we're trying to protect what we're trying to do, but I cannot protect the French companies whose stock is traded in the American exchanges in case Americans are making decisions in as far as the Iranian sanctions are concerned. And that is something if Iran is not acting correctly. But can I legally tell them that I'm going to protect you and safeguard you? But Total and Airbus, and I'm going to use the taxpayers' money in order to compensate all of the losses that Total may sustain. No, it is improper to use taxpayers' money like that. So one shouldn't consider this particular approach. So these companies, because their stock is being traded globally and they're broadly representing the American market, they themselves need to come up with their own choice. I'm neither the senior executive of Total nor Airbus or any other company that may be affected. So these companies should gauge the potential of the Iranian market and what kind of risk they may face in the American market. And that does apply to the extraterritoriality. But something that we organize every time, whatever we do every time, is that we need to work with other companies and identify other ways to finance, or those others who fix their signature to this treaty should find industrial, legal, financial instruments in order for the industrial output not to be doubted. For example, look at Total. Total signed an agreement with the Chinese partners, and since they are present in the American market, I mean, the Chinese partner is not present here, so they have to exit the Chinese market, but the Chinese company is not present in the American market. So it means that we maintain our obligation as written within the Iranian treaty, but that reflects the true state of things. So I cannot say that Total must give up on their presence in the American market. So certain tangible consequences from the American decisions. This is not about trying to help the Chinese companies. And Deputy Chairman definitely can enjoy this course of things.
The Iran deal, you tried to persuade him not to quit the climate deal, not to start a trade war, not to move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. You tried to do all these things. You tried a softly approach, and it has not worked. Do you now think you should argue with Mr. Trump in a much harder way?
D'abord, je vous remercie de le constater et de le dire. J'ai essayé. Et j'ai constamment œuvré.
I made an attempt. I tried. I continuously worked on that because that is my responsibility, considering the level of confidence I have. And I believe that I would have been reprimanded if I wouldn't put all my energy into trying to avoid this particular outcome. And then I believe fully in the French foreign policy, which is based upon independence. I understand quite well that there are things that really tie us very closely with the United States, specifically in as far as the foreign security is concerned. And I indeed enjoy these close relationships very much, but there are certain topics where we do not see eye to eye with each other. We do not stick to the very same position all the time. There is also friendship, which evolved thanks to our history and to our past. But there are certain things as well that we disagree with. For example, as far as the climate is concerned, I wasn't able to convince President Trump not to withdraw from because he made this promise during his election campaign, but I do believe that the collective mobilization whereby we try to push it forward together. And in this sense, I would like to extend my gratitude to China and President Xi Jinping, who immediately felt the need to act. And we were able to do it in such a way so that nobody else gave up on this agreement. And the speed of the ratification process speaks for it. So at the international level, President Trump simply lost out on this level because he couldn't do anything, in a sense that nobody followed him in what he was trying to do. So we need to really uphold our commitments, and I may say that we are not yet reaching up to the level that we need to go up to because we're not sufficiently quickly reduce the CO2 emissions, but that is already our responsibility rather than responsibility of the United States. Second point, Jerusalem. I openly stated that that was an erroneous decision. I don't think that we need to destabilize the situation in that region, which is relying upon very clearly set forth principle and certain balances. I naturally support the decision related to there being two states, because France has always been adhering to one should never forget about the people living there, and we need to continue negotiations, and there have to be two states which would have its own capital cities, the borders which will be recognized and which could exist in peace. So the decision to move the embassy was not a very correct one, not very desirable decision. We do regret that this happened. We do remember the kind of events which occurred after the embassy was inaugurated in Jerusalem. And we understand that this has brought about a full escalation of various activities. Certainly, in this sense, Hamas is also should be held responsible. Therefore, would like to welcome President Abbas's resolute decision. However, several dozens of people died because of the conflicts, the border conflict with Hamas involvement. And then I neither could convince President Trump with respect to Iran, but in any case, I tried to convince him. And I was standing by our position. I was saying that we signed this treaty specifically within the multilateral framework. And I believe that this particular approach allowed for a certain openness, and President Trump acknowledged this openness. Here we're talking about the kind of openness whereby we can try and move towards a different set of terms in a treaty. And I believe that President Trump gave up on the 2016 treaty because it was signed by his predecessor. I mean, it was bad in his understanding by default. But now it seems to me that we are enjoying an all-round support, and we are setting up a coalition. And I believe that we will be able to set forth the kind of conditions whereby there won't be improper escalation. And President Putin reminded us about it when he was speaking about the visit by the Israeli Prime Minister to Russia. And so now we need to further continue our discussion with Iran in order to convince the United States to gradually go back into the discussion, because we will slightly expand the framework, not because we're giving up on the treaty of 2015, but because we are responding to a very legitimate concern on the part of Israel, Saudi Arabia, and to a larger extent, we are thinking about the need to stabilize the situation in the whole region. And so I believe that the kind of dialogue that I had with President Trump was very necessary, but it was also very useful because it enabled to open up this particular feature that enabled us to move forward. Of course, this is a very important effort related to try and convince. There is friendship on the one hand, there is an alliance on the other hand, which is necessary, and one we need to combat terrorism and in the security matters, and I shall continue this work because that is my duty.
And Vice President Wang Qishan, we have the issue. You can now run for President of Russia as well. The Prime Minister Abe and Vice President Wang Qishan, we have the issue of America, North Korea, and the talks. Yesterday, Donald Trump said the talks were off. There are now some rumors where he says maybe they could come back on. I wanted to ask both of you who you thought was more to blame for the fact that the talks may not go ahead. Is it North Korea, or is it Donald Trump for pulling back? I wonder, Vice Premier Wang Qishan, if I can come to you first. China has always been an esteemed ally, a big ally of North Korea. Do you think they are more to blame this time?
今回の米中首脳会談が実施されなくなったことについては大変残念に思っています。
As for the summit between North Korea and the US, it was an event we were looking forward to. This is the task given in a UN Security Council resolution, the issue of WMDs, ballistic missiles. All these weapons have to be effectively eliminated, and that was the main goal of a summit between the US and North Korea. And through holding such a summit, we should advance the resolution of these issues. And as I said when I talked, we, Japan and North Korea, have this issue of enforced disappearance. Many Japanese girls around 13 years old disappeared. They were kidnapped, and in 2002, Kim Jong-un recognized this fact, the fact of kidnapping of Japanese girls. And these issues have to be given a comprehensive resolution. Dialogue for the sake of a dialogue is pointless. Dialogue needs to lead to actions. And this was the path we were following. Yes, there were many issues, but as for a summit between North Korea and the US, I think in future we have to do everything so as to ensure such a summit between North Korea and the US. And to that end, the issues that have piled up have to be resolved. Kim Jong-un published a statement saying that he'll try to find an opportunity to organize such a summit between the two countries. Others should also pool their efforts together. Such countries as the permanent members of the UN Security Council, France, Russia, and the other members of the UN Security Council, all of them have to work together so as to implement the UN resolution to force North Korea to do that as well. The most important thing is to continue with our efforts. North Korea should be able to take concrete actions. I do hope that concrete actions will be made by all the participants of the process, including by North Korea. As for sanctions, there is a trend at trying to find a a way out of sanctions, to do that. And Japan is trying to counter that. I do hope that we'll be able to prevail with these efforts.
Do you have an approach from China's side about an answer to this problem?
Before coming here, when I watched television and the internet, I saw some news saying that representatives of the Chinese Foreign Ministry have expressed the position of the Chinese government on the cancellation of a summit between North Korea and the US. Well, you asked this question, and I have to tell you that the nuclear issue of the Korean Peninsula has a bearing on China's core interests. China hopes for peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula. Under no circumstances should we allow a war or any clashes to happen in this peninsula. That is why we should promote the process of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and we adhere to a very determined, decisive position on that matter. Yes, yesterday I read some news. Despite the statement of President Trump or the statement of North Korea, both sides still leave some maneuver for a decision. So I'm confident that peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula have to be maintained. And it's between North Korea and the US right now. And a summit is needed to achieve a breakthrough. I often believe that to achieve the best result, you've got to wait for a long time. But in order to settle this issue, I believe we have to be full of hope. And hope is about the theme of this forum.
Madam Lagarde in a second, but do you have any advice to the world in terms of how to deal with President Trump? Because you were somebody who was associated with the election of President Trump, and yet you look and see what has happened. There are many people here under sanctions. He has just withdrawn from the Iran deal. There are doubts about the North Korean deal. What do you think you have got from the relationship with him? The same question that I asked Mr. Macron.
Well, he's an agent provocateur. I was not connected to the Trump electoral campaign. Well, certainly, we cannot be satisfied with the current level and the nature of the American-Russian relations, and we're willing to engage in this dialogue. Mr. Trump has suggested that a separate meeting should be held. So far, we didn't manage to work it out yet because many issues are popping up, but we are willing to have this conversation, a substantive one. I think it's high time we engaged in that. We need a multilateral approach like that on many domains. Donald Trump has expressed a concern about a new arms race, and I concur with him fully. The measures that we are talking about in North Korea, Iran, they're not bringing us together. But that is another reason to talk about these matters. Emmanuel has said that Europe and the United States have mutual obligations. Europe is dependent on the US in terms of security, but one shouldn't be alarmed. We'll help. We'll help ensure the security. And in any case, we're going to do everything in our power so as to avoid any new threats. I think this is the avenue we should be pursuing. That's the first thing. Secondly, I'll enter sort of a discussion with President of France, who said that Donald Trump lost because he pulled out from the Iranian deal. I don't think he lost. First and foremost, he is just doing good on his electoral promises, and in that sense is a victor domestically. But should this deal be demolished for good, then many will stand to lose. And we have to do everything so as to avoid the crumbling of this Iranian nuclear deal. And for that end, we have to work with all the participants of the process, primarily with the United States of America. Why is that? I'm going to reveal some secrets to you. How was this deal prepared? It was mostly a dialogue between the US and Iran, and all the other participants of the process were simply adjusting the course, Russia included. And we did that very often so as to secure Iran's interest. I'm not going to hide that. But at the end, everyone arrived at a common denominator. After some in-depth bilateral talks between Iran and the United States of America. despite all the difficulties, it seems two countries did manage to come to an agreement. And right now, the president of the US doesn't shut the door to talks. He only says that he is dissatisfied with many things, but he does not rule out an agreement. But this has to be a two-way street. So one shouldn't paint too gloomy a picture. If we want to preserve something, we've got to leave the door open to a negotiating process and to final result. And I think all is not lost yet.
Mrs. Lagarde,
Je voulais lever une ambiguïté. Je n'ai pas dit que sur l'accord iranien,
I'd like to say that as for the Iranian deal, I'm not saying that Trump lost. I talked about the Paris climate deal. I said that he couldn't threaten this agreement at the international level. I am just talking about the consequences, but it is our agreement. As for security matters, I'd like to assure Vladimir that I'm not afraid at all, because France has armed forces that are fully capable of protecting the country, but I've got some obligations, commitments with regard to our European allies. I believe the current architecture of European security that I've just talked about is an area of our responsibility. Anyway, we're not going to turn our backs on one another, and we couldn't ensure security to the detriment of others, and that is how we should act, I think. I'm not afraid, and I'd like to express my responsibility and make good on it. Well, certainly, one shouldn't be afraid. But you see, the practice is there. We are talking about Iran all the same, but there was the practice of the US sanctions used against European economic operators. We saw an example, 9 billion, I think, Paribas, French bank, Deutsche Bank, they were fined for breach of unilateral sanctions. And they had no choice but to pay up. And I think the same happened to Japanese bank. And this is something we have to put an end to, because that is unacceptable. That is what I'm talking about. And should this practice continue, nothing good will come out of it, because that undermines the current world order. We've got to agree with our American counterparts on some joint rules of game, because that is very important, because that what underlies our current discussion, trust. That if it's either there or not, if there is no trust, then nothing good will come out of that. And as I said when I spoke, apart from the element of force, nothing will be left in international affairs, and that will result in tragedy. I share your point of view fully. Everything you said about financial issues and economic matters, there is no doubt about that. That is something I also spoke about. We've got to build a stable, a useful world order, and that will rest on multilateralism and sovereignty. And sovereignty presupposes respect for the interests of citizens and companies who are dependent on their country. And in that sense, we concur fully, and we have to have the necessary tools. And that is something we've got to reach an agreement with the US. And there's something I'd like to say. I wanted to ensure our sovereignty here, and all the decisions I made once I entered into office was to that end. And as for security, there is no suspicion there at all. We have common history. We have the collective system of defense and security that is very important for Europe and for the US. And I think that the mistake that was made over the last 2 decades consisted in the fact that through NATO, we did manage to make good on all the commitments that we undertook in the past. And that was not very just. And we didn't show enough trust which Russia could count. I have to tell you the truth here. That's why I've come here. Yes, in terms of financial, economic, sovereignty, trade and security, the EU, France and Russia have to build a new architecture which will help us advance in an atmosphere of trust. And we shouldn't confuse these two matters, but I concur with
President Putin something. President Putin, if you look at this, if you look around this room, you would seem to be evidence that sanctions do not work. Virtually everyone I meet here has been sanctioned in some way, and yet Russian business continues to thrive. Do sanctions still have any effect at all?
Look, today we were talking about sports, and my good friend, Mr. Prime Minister, he imagined that Russia and Japan are going to play against each other in the World Cup final. Just imagine that we lose. That is going to be a totally bad thing to happen. It's unimaginable, but it's not all about this. The thing is that the kind of environment is evolving in the world where everyone is playing football, but at the same time they are applying the judo fight rules. A very interesting game comes out of it. It's neither football nor it a judo. It's just a chaos. That is where we're going, and that is something that we're concerned with. It's really not about the results of the so-called sanctions and restrictions being applied, and the fact that the people here who feel what it is, understand what it is, they encounter what it is, a prevalent majority of them is here because this sanctional club, this baton is being applied more and more often, and not only with respect to Russia. Now, is it good or bad? Can it be overcome or not? Well, certainly. The Russian economy is evidently stable, despite, triple or double shocks related to the price decline on our traditional exports, staples, energy, metals, chemicals, the sanctional pressure on top of it. So it all came upon us simultaneously, but we were able to persevere and pass through it, and to a certain extent we're able to strengthen our economy, and I'm very grateful to Christine. She specifically described what should be considered a positive thing in the development of the Russian economy, i.e. the macroeconomic component. But anyway, everybody sustains losses, but secondly, that contains things, because these restrictions, they deter the ability to develop, because our companies are not able to enjoy full lending internationally. So that leads to certain restrictions at a certain stage. Then a breakthrough is taking place, ways of resolving the problems are found, and everybody comes into place. So in the end of the day, this particular policy doesn't carry any sense, neither economic nor political nor a military one. As far as the military is concerned, as I mentioned it, one of the reasons behind the attempts to curtail Russia, not allow Russia to develop defense technologies, but very recently we were able to demonstrate, and we were able to really take over many of our partners in these defense technologies, despite the sanctions. So this is senseless, and it's quite detrimental at the same time.
John, do you allow me to jump in? I just would like to make one point, and it's certainly not for me to have an opinion on what is national security, and the leaders here are much better at that. But when we decide to rebuild, reorganize, redefine the architecture of the international order and the multilateralism, I think we need to be really careful as to the transparency and the actual impact, because while we are referring to decisions that have been made by Mr. Trump recently, the ambiguity that is embedded in the US national law system has actually affected many companies that are represented here. Even when the United States and its allies decided to lift the sanctions on Iran, many companies here in this room did not do business with Iran, or they used some very funny financial circuits involving some strange banks sometimes in order to do business with Iran. simply because the US legal system and judiciary system is such circumvoluted and obscure constructively for the US interest that there is no confidence, even though the sanctions had been lifted. So I think in rebuilding and redesigning, the actual impact at home, domestically, in the various countries that are party to those agreements really need to be clarified. And that applies to the sanctions that have been decided against some Russian individuals as well, where there is great uncertainty as to whether or not they are targeted themselves, their shareholding in companies, the companies themselves, some holdings, large territories of their corporate empire. So that is a real issue of confidence that is simply not there and needs to be addressed.
Can I change the subject a bit with you towards the broader subject of global trade, which you discussed? And we have had a great deal of criticism of America on this panel on many different issues, unilateral ones where it has seemed to take a unilateral approach. But the other side of the trade dispute, of the biggest trade dispute at the moment, is China. You have the Vice President sitting next door to you. What do you think China should do to open up its markets to America, and where do you think it should play its part in that? Mrs. Lagarde.
First of all, trade has been good to China. And trade has been good to many other countries as well in improving living standards, in lifting people out of poverty, and in acting as a driver for growth. And trade is a driver for growth around the world and has been. Now, after 10 years of depressed growth and depressed trade, trade is finally picking up and finally growing faster than global growth. So it's really an imperative not just for China, but for all countries that rely on trade for their growth, to defend the international order in which trade is operated. Now, as I understand it, the complaint that the US has vis-à-vis China is of two different natures. One is China sells more than it buys from the US, and that is the bilateral trade deficit between the United States and China. It's a very strange way to look at the balancing act around the world. And one country should not look at one single deficit with another country, but its overall position vis-à-vis the rest of the world. That's how it really works. And it's, a strange complaint. The second side of the complaint of the United States is that in the trade game that is played by all, the allegation against China is that it does not respect the intellectual property rights. It forces transfers of technology when it accepts foreign direct investors in China. It subsidizes some of its state-owned enterprises. And according to the allegations, it is unfair trade practices that need to be investigated, looked into, and eventually sanctioned. And if that is true, well, there is a forum to debate those issues. And the WTO, to which China is a party, to which the United States is a party, which it was an original founder of, should be the forum where that is debated. And then it's a question of making sure that decisions made are effectively implemented by China. So to do it outside that forum is, number one, not the right way to go, because it's ignoring the rules that you've actually volunteered. And number two, taking a unilateral approach that is going to be a self-inflicted wound on the economy that decides it. If I tell you that when the US decided sanctions many years ago against China in the field of tires, the big tires that go on the big lorries, each job saved in the United States cost $900,000 per job saved. This is not the way to go. The cost-benefit analysis should drive to that conclusion.
Vice President Wang Qishan, I see you have applauded Mrs. Lagarde. Do you see?
He always does.
How do you see China approaching this dispute? Is this an area where America has got it completely wrong, or is there room for China to open up its markets?
First of all, I would like to emphasize that in China, I was not involved in regulation of the trade issue, which is not part of my authority, but historically, I did some work as a deputy chairman of the State Council when I was overseeing the issues of our relationship with the United States. In as far as the trade war is concerned between China and US, between our two countries, it's very fast-paced. Very often we are holding consultations. And I believe that we must act in a reserved manner, and we should not be emotional about it. The China chairman, Xi Jinping, he once stated that China is not afraid of anything, but it doesn't make sense for China to provoke an incident. We believe that in any case we need to avoid any trade war because there won't be any winners in such a war. Like the case was in the example of the war between England and France. 100 years it lasted for. But in the textbooks about history, there's only one line describing it, which says that France took a great victory in that war. And the current world and mutual benefit or zero-sum game. This is a very serious matter, and the Chinese government has always been following the principles of mutual benefit, because that is something that will bring good to all of the peoples on the world and will reflect the interest of all of the nations. Chairman Xi Jinping came out with such an initiative to create the community of the single destiny, specifically based upon the ability to go either for the mutual benefit or the zero game. Such a choice is something that everyone should ponder. That is my short reply to the question. It's just that I want also to say thank you very much for the question.
Vice President, one other question. I know that you have always studied America. You are a student of Alexis de Tocqueville. You often talk about America. Do you still think that China can learn from America, or do you think it has now passed it?
There are a lot of things that we can learn from America because America is the only global superpower. Despite the soft power or the hard power, they're still number one. This is the biggest developed country, and China, the biggest emerging country, the first economy, and the second economy in terms of volume. And so we need to cooperate, and we know quite well about it. Without a single emotion, we should try to achieve the best possible results, but we should be ready to face any circumstances. And that is the wisdom of the philosophy of the Chinese people.
You are an ally of America, and yet it has caused you some trouble over trade. Have you changed your opinion of America too?
まず貿易投資についてはですね、WTO のルールと整合的でなければならないと我々は考えています。例えば、鉄鋼アルミについてアメリカは232を日本に対して適用しようとこうしているわけであります。
Imposes higher duties in Japan, despite being the US ally, but we disagree with from the point of view of national security, countries should impose duties. But the fact of the matter is that 60% of the Japanese produce steel. The United States doesn't have any alternative to the products exported from Japan. So American consumers will suffer, the ones who consume Japanese products. We gave a detailed story about it to President Trump. As far as trade is concerned, one should not only pay attention to the trading disbalance, which is something that I told to President Trump many times. We ought to think not only about the commodity trade disbalances, but of course we've got quite a positive surplus, 97 billion US dollars, which is not as big as what China has, but in services and the financial sector, we experience quite a deficit in Japan with respect to the United States. And also investing into America, we create a lot of jobs. 69 billion US dollars was the surplus, but whereas the American automotive and construction companies produce automobiles in the territories of the United States and export them, and that is 75.5 billion US dollars worth. So this is the kind of revenue that the Japanese companies generate in the territory of the United States for the United States. And so it is really worthwhile noting, like I previously stated, I believe that it is necessary to pay a systemic attention to trade as such and act within the WTO rules, which is something that we speak about domestically as well as call upon our American partners to act in the same step. As far as the TTP agreement is concerned, according to the pre-election agreements and commitments, Trump withdrew from this treaty, but is a very significant framework, which also includes the intellectual property protection, environmental protection, and other areas. And therefore, such comprehensive rules are necessary to continue developing fair trade, and this is the kind of fairness that we need to develop together. Unfortunately, the US withdrew from this agreement, but right now 11 nations have come to an agreement and signed the TTP agreement and have ratified this 11 nations, and we would very much like for the ratification process to gradually and speedily be unfolding in other countries so that
Thank you very much. Mr. Putin, this
possibly the
conference,
United States will change its mind.
Trust. And as you know, that in the other rest of Europe, the newspapers over the past couple of days
and so this conference of building the economy of trust
team into the destruction of Malaysia Airlines plane MH17 came forward and said it had proved
with respect to the
missile,
the downing of the Malaysian
came from the 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade of the Russian Army based in Kirkuk. When you were asked about this yesterday, you said you did not have an explanation. I wondered now, what is the explanation? Have they made this up? Or was the missile allowed to cross into Ukraine? What happened to the chain of command on this particular issue?
I said it yesterday, I can repeat it. Unfortunately, we are not privy to a full-fledged investigation, and that is why we don't have the reasons to completely accept the results of such investigation. We're not participating in it, but the arguments that we propose in order for them to be taken into account in this investigation are not being accepted by the investigating committee. Let me remind us yet again that this very sorrowful tragedy, and like it was mentioned yesterday, we should always think about the beloved ones and the families of those who died because of this terrible catastrophe. We will certainly always remember it. But somehow or other, the fact that Ukraine did not perform on its obligations set forth by the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and didn't close the airspace over the territory where hostilities were going on. Somehow nobody remembers this. There are different versions of this tragedy, but somehow or other nobody is taking these into account. So if there is no comprehensive investigation, it will certainly be very difficult for us to accept the conclusions of the investigating commission, which works without our participation. But we unfortunately had other tragic events related to Ukraine. Once they shot down the Russian aircraft which was flying to Russia from Israel over the Black Sea, and they didn't, admit that they were behind it. They didn't pay any compensation. Unfortunately, we have a lot of negative practices with Ukraine. But as far as this particular tragic case is concerned, we would like to fully participate in the investigation.
One last question on that. Are you saying this was not a Russian missile? This was not a Russian army missile?
Нет, конечно. It was not, certainly. It was not. I shall repeat. There are several versions, including whereby that was the Ukrainian army missile, Ukrainian warplanes was involved. There is nothing that would be accepted by us in terms of the final conclusion without us fully being involved in the investigation.
Can I come to you on that subject? You actually have many disagreements with Mr. Putin, as you pointed out. I wondered whether your approach towards dealing with him is something that you will continue in the same vein. You've come here to make your case on Iran, you've come here to make your case on other things. What is your view about what is the best way for Russia to rebuild its ties with the West?
D'abord, c'est ensemble qu'on a à le dire.
Well, basically speaking, it has already been mentioned, and one should take a very moderate position with respect to the last issue that you brought up. I would say that President Putin is completely correct. We should remember the victims of this tragedy, their family members, be it the families in Denmark, in Holland, Belgium, but independent investigation has been set forth. So it is very important now to organize cooperation, and so I very much agree with what Mr. Putin yesterday mentioned, that we need to cooperate with the system of justice in Netherlands in order to understand what kind of results were arrived at, and in what way. But what is important and significant within the contemporary context, we need to maintain a continuous dialogue. We also need to do some good, fruitful work in the area of collective security, specifically as far as the Middle East is concerned. Yesterday, I believe that we have advanced ourselves quite well along such important issues like Iran to ensure that the 2015 agreement prevails, and try to further work negotiating about it. With respect to Syria, we also undertook a joint humanitarian initiative, as well as we have agreed upon the way the mechanism existing between ourselves should further work. I mean, the Astana group and the so-called the smaller group, which was initiated by France several months ago with a number of permanent Security Council, UN Security Council members, UK, US, as well as Germany, as well as certain other regional nations such as Jordan and Egypt. And so we agreed to set up a coordination mechanism so as to be able to work within a single agenda, so as together work to put together a common roadmap in order to ensure a good future for Syria, to ensure peaceful sovereignty, and which will be an inclusive one in terms of the processes taking place in this country. And further on, we should together build our future in Europe in a geopolitical sense as well, because I presume that this is something that I would rather say that this depends upon our capability to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. And so, in as far as this matter is concerned, we've got the Minsk Accord, we have the Normandy format within which we are going to continue to act. Apart from that, we need to continue a strategic dialogue on the matters of security, cyberspace, and economics. And that is exactly what we've been busy with together. And we've envisaged a very specific action, because I'm sure that you noted that we've signed about 50 agreements in the economic, strategic areas, very important ones, as well as in the area of the cyberspace. We also agreed to work together in order to develop and put together a single charter within which we'll be able to resolve different disputes. And that is a very important point, strategically as well. Here we've been able to exchange some humorous words. Certainly, there is a bit of a lack of understanding between Russia and the European Union. During the past decade, to say it more precisely, we're talking about the European Union, NATO, and Russia, and France, which has always been pursuing an independent foreign policy, which has a very strong army, which has a very clear-cut foreign policy. So I suppose that France can act in a very optimal way in order to build and think more about this architecture. Because if, geopolitically, in a military way, in terms of the security and in the economic, in terms of the cyberspace, to build certain lines of force and certain commonality, the common language, if I may say so, I would insist that that will be very important and very useful for the stability in Europe and for all the world. It's going to be very good for our peoples.
Je pense, il ne m'appartient pas ça de le dire, moi je suis très prudent sur les sujets d'élargissement.
One should be cautious about any possible expansion, because there used to be a bit of an euphoria on the part of the European Union. But when you are expanding without reforming anything, that really doesn't come out very effectively. So it seems to me that the European Union should be more sovereign, more unified, more democratic, and should understand what is its strategic priorities. So I believe that there is a bit of a centralized union which shares certain rules from the point of view of taxation, as well as from the point of view of labor regulation. But there is also another Europe which is somewhat in other regions, which is not part of this centralized nucleus. And in this sense, of course, Russia has a place in such a Europe. And so I often think about the Russian place in the Council of Europe, because the common space of law and values which identifies our countries as a broader Europe, I believe this is quite feasible, and I believe that certain work needs to be put into it. Reform is necessary on the part of the European Union. But on top of that, I believe that it's very important for us to enjoy very deep common strategic projects for the future years to come.
Ça dépend de vous deux, si je puis utiliser cette plaisanterie.
Well, that really depends upon the two of you, if you allow me to express this joke, dear John.
Dans l'histoire, les peurs peuvent conduire à des choix.
There are certain points in history when fear may push one to make certain decisions. I do not think that we're doomed to that, but we do carry a lot of responsibility at the point in time when we here talk about it.
Mr. Putin, President Putin, what is your goal for Russia and the West? Where do you want to see Russia and the West? Despite all these misunderstandings, we could have gone through many other ones. Where do you actually want to take Russia? Do you want St. Petersburg, this place which is seen as the symbol of the Western capital of Russia? Can you imagine this again being integrated into Europe in the sort of way that Mr. Macron described?
Every nation has its national priorities and its own interests. And I spoke about it in the course of my presentation here, and we will certainly be striving to achieve our national interests, now in terms of what they are today and for the foreseeable future, first and foremost in our internal development, because we need to provide for the growth of labor productivity in this country's economy. We need to create terms and conditions to attract investment, because without investments it would be impossible to resolve another problem. It would be impossible to diversify our economy. Madame Lagarde yesterday told me about it and also made a hint at that today as well. We've got 4.5% of growth of investment into the fixed capital last year, while the economic growth was 1.1%, which was a good indicator, an accelerated investment. But that is not enough, absolutely not enough. But in order for us to be able to attract capital from friendly companies and nations, we need to maintain good relations with Europe, with the rest of the world, with the United States as well. We're very well aware of this. But if we are to be forced into a choice, should we exist as a sovereign state or certain restrictions should be imposed upon us, we will certainly go for the first option, because these substances which are upon the scales are incompatible. An existence of a nation or certain investments as a pittance of a sort. We are trying to achieve the kind of investments so as to bring back or establish the new rules of the game in the area of security and the international policy, with the help of the currently existing institutions, which definitely should further evolve. But on that particular ground, we want to resolve the following matter: to diversify Russia's economy, to make it innovative. We want to work over artificial intellect and technology development. And actually, Christine expressed some concern over the robotics and the loss of employment. You know, this is not so much fearful, I should say, although these kinds of phobias do exist, and people fear this, and there is a danger of this. But as deemed by the international experts, only 5% of workplaces globally could be completely automated, and only 10% have already been automated out of what can be done right now. So there is a lot of room both for the Russian economy as well as the global economy, and upon this ground we want to achieve the most important objective. We want to raise the level, the quality of our life. We want to reduce the number of people who live below the poverty line. We want to achieve the situation whereby the biggest performance indicator, the lifespan, should increase up to 78 years by 2024, and by 2030 for it to be 80 plus. This is everything feasible, but amongst other conditions, favorable external conditions are necessary, and we're going to do everything we can in order to achieve it without forgetting that, and that is also the point of our national interest, but at the same time, we cannot sacrifice our sovereignty and our fundamental interests. So I hope that this equilibrium between Russia and our partners will be found.
Can I ask you one final question, is who will win the World Cup?
The organizers will win, who at a respective level will organize this excellent festivity for the whole of the international community, for all of those who love this excellent international game. That is what we see as our ultimate objective, but in as far as the winning team is concerned, as they say, the strongest shall win. And I would very much like this to be a real celebration for all those who love the sports, both for the football players and for our guests, who will do everything for both the fans and the players to feel in Russia like home.
I hope you will see that retail politics still works in Russia. I would like to thank our panel very much. I've been told in my ear we have to wrap up. I would like to thank the audience particularly for waiting. I know you had to wait a long time before we came on stage, like the Rolling Stones. We took our time. I would like to thank Christine Lagarde. I'd like to thank Vice President Wang Qishan. I'd like to thank Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, President Putin, and President Macron. Thank you all very much. I'm sorry if I missed some of your own questions, but thank you.
And on my part, and on behalf of all my colleagues, I would like to express my gratitude to our moderator today, because I believe it was done in a very professional way. You've managed to really turn this discussion into a very lively, very interesting discussion. Thank you very much.